Well, that was nice and quiet with absolutely nothing worth talking about, right? No?
No, nothing at all.
No, didn't think so either. Welcome to the WTF1 Wrap, powered by MoneyGrab. I am your host, Dre Harrison, and welcome to the Winners and Losers Sprint Edition of the WTF1 Wrap. I'm here with an esteemed guest representing Red Bulls Esports, and I have to say, we joked about this before we went on the air. The best setup of anyone we've invited so far on this show.
Thank you.
It's beautifully done. You know him as Ponden, and yes, it's another Australian / New Zealand guest. We're keeping the streak going. This is a hat trick. Hello, Blake.
We need to get everyone on the whole just everyone Australian creators from here on out.
It works. People love them. What can I say? But Blake, pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. Tell the good people out there a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having me on. I'm primarily a Twitch streamer, kind of branching out to all other socials now. But I'm a content creator for Red Bull Racing Esports, and been a fan for 5 seasons now, and just been kind of focusing on doing a lot of different watch-alongs and stuff like that. So appreciate having me on.
Oh, pleasure to have you on, my friend. You can say thanks to Hannah, our social media admin, for doing the scouting on our behalf. She's pulled a blinder with many of these already. But pleasure to have Blake on, and we're going to talk about the sprint, the shootout in general. Over the next half an hour or so, a lot went down. Well, maybe not necessarily a lot during the actual sprint, but there was one big, very worthy incident to talk about, which we'll get to very, very shortly, I do promise. But we'll also go up and down the grid, talk about the winners and losers, have some opinions about how their weekends are looking as we go through Saturday's running. But first of all, I wanted to tap your brain into something on this one, Blake, because obviously the big story going into this weekend was the changes to the sprint weekend format in general. We now have the shootout, as they call it now, the sprint shootout on Saturday morning. What have you made of all the changes in general? Because obviously it's clearly split the room.
Yeah, I feel like the sprint overall, like the sprint format overall, both last year and this year, like it's is it better than practice sessions? Yes, but is it that great to the point where it should be affecting how we feel on a race? Like, it takes away a lot from the race. I don't know. I'm still on the edge. I personally really enjoyed the sprint shootout. Like, I don't know if it was just because it was earlier on in the day and I had a lot more energy as an Australian. Like, they put on at 6 p.m. for us, but I really enjoyed the sprint shootout. But the race was just your typical, like, okay, well, we find out the strategy, we find out Ferrari's race pace, so that's not going to be as exciting tomorrow. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
I mean, for me personally, I think the shootout is better than a Parc Fermé FP2. Generally speaking, I think that's certainly an improvement on that regard. But I also think a lot of us made a big fuss about a change that I think it actually hasn't changed all that much. I think it's better that the conventional qualifying we have on a Friday now determines the grid for Sunday rather than having the sprint determine that. Yeah, I like that better. But I also think I actually think we've probably made a bit of a mountain of a molehill, which something we never do when it comes to discussing F1 on the internet. We're normally very calm, very nuanced, and we play everything down. But is it just me, Ponden, or is it just feels like it actually wasn't a huge amount that's actually changed here?
I do think there was like good changes, like you said. Like everything I feel like was a positive. Like. But like you said, it didn't. I don't think it really changed the overall like feel of the weekend. Like I think Formula One has been really pushing the sprint stuff for. I mean, obviously they want to get more view time at the end of the day, and like as fans,
more meaningful action.
Yeah, and as fans, I think we do get that, but for me, I'm so like I'm very big on the storylines and like the Grand Prix itself and making that as special as possible, and it just takes away too much from that.
That's absolutely a valid point. I mean, what I used to say was when we had the original sprint format, I don't know if you watch any NASCAR, but where they have stage racing now, they break races up into thirds. It felt like we were getting a 2-day 400-kilometer Grand Prix
Yeah.
with a red flag for 24 hours at like 1/4 distance. That's what it kind of felt
Yeah.
like to me. So actually having it like this, I think works a little bit better, but we also might be giving a bit too much away with the sprint in
Yeah.
general. I mean, it's funny. I mean, Max said himself after this race, like, what do you think of the sprint now they've changed the format? He said, scrap the whole thing. I don't think he was in a very talkative mood, which I think actually segues us in quite nicely to the main story of that sprint, and that was the lap 1 collision between, or collisions really, I guess we could say, between Max
I think
Verstappen.
it's 3 of them.
I think that was 3, at least 2. I think it was more a bit of a squeeze at turn 3 on that opening lap, but a triple side-by-side incident between Max Verstappen and George Russell. For those who may have missed it, George Russell had a chance to get at Max Verstappen for 3rd on the opening lap of the sprint. They have minor contact at the first corner, minor contact at the second corner, which punches a hole in the side of Verstappen's side pod, and then there's a bit of a squeeze there. Max eventually wins that fight once we got going again, because we'll talk about the other safety car incident a little bit later on. But some heated words after the race. Afterwards, George and Max wasn't best pleased about it. But Max in particular may have muttered a certain expletive regarding a certain crotch area and your head in reference to George Russell. This is a PG show, so I can't actually directly directly say it, but you get the gist. I mean, what do you make of that? Because I think there was a lot going on here.
Yeah, for me, I think Formula One, sports in general, is it's all about the emotions, and I think Max has every right to express those. But I did see a lot of comments on Twitter afterwards, and to be honest, I have kind of changed my opinion on it a little bit. Like at the end of the day, like he did kind of go a little bit too far. Like you do have to kind of represent. You are the 2-time champ and you got kids looking up to you, and you've got to kind of make sure it's done professionally at the end of the day. But at the same time, like, look at it from Max's perspective. Like, he's just had his side pod put a big hole in it, and could have potentially been worse. He's had potentially a sprint win or a 2nd place taken away from him. Like, you are going to be mad about that. Yeah, it's a tough one because Max is obviously in the wrong, but then you can look at it the other way. Like, that's the way Max drives. Like, I saw a very good comment on, someone made a really good comment. Like, that's how Max drives against people. So when it's done back to him, he's kind of got to respect that. Like, you can acknowledge, like, okay, I've got damage. He deserves a pen. But like, commenting on the level of driving or the etiquette of driving, like, at the end of the day, that's how Max wants to drive, is that aggressive racing. And look from Russell's POV, like, you're in P4, you want to go for that podium. He's Russell hasn't really done anything wrong, but he has obviously caused an incident. So yeah,
it's a tough one. For me, I think George is slightly in the wrong. I think he absolutely does initiate contact. I think Verstappen raced him fair. It was hard, but I think it was ultimately fair. I think he did give Russell a car whip's room. And George has made contact. I mean, the onus is on the overtaking car, you'd feel, to do it safely. But I also think Max has probably made a bit of a mountain out of a bit of a molehill. And I love that Amy Reeves in the comments literally said the exact same thing as the comment popped up, making another mountain out of a molehill. I completely agree, Amy, for what it's worth. Yes, I think, George was probably slightly in the wrong. Yes, it's probably damaged his race a little bit. But I also think Max probably went a little bit OTT in some of his comments, and I completely agree with you, Ponden, in that if he has raced people very aggressively, if not more so, in his career to this date. If you can't be surprised if someone retaliates in the same way against you. You kind of veto the right to complain to a degree. I mean, I think Max absolutely does have a right to feel hard done by, because I think Russell, for what it's worth, I think it's a racing incident. I don't think any penalties or anything like that was worthy. I think leaving that as it lied, I think, was probably the right decision. But I also think Max probably, if he backs down out of this, he probably gets the benefit of the doubt from people on the internet. But now, because he's retaliated in quite an aggressive manner, people who already don't like him are going to go, "Oh, look at him complaining about it." You know, is that the impression I get here?
Yeah, I just think from a racing standpoint, like it is a collision, and I think Max could have gone the route of, look, this is why, I've got damage, I've essentially lost out here. Like, this is why we got to have penalties on lap one, because I think Max has been very consistent with that opinion of let's be careful on lap one, guys. Like, there's a difference between racing someone one-on-one and later on in a race and essentially ruining our entire races on lap one, because yeah, like we've been saying, like Max, he did kind of go that step further and kind of go personally, and like even after Russell kind of explained it, yeah, I don't know, it was like that fine line of Max trying to make a point but kind of like going a bit too far with it.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty fair across the board, really. How that's been educated. Let us know in the comments. I might get back to them by the end of the show towards if we've got a bit of time. Let us know what you thought of that incident as well. I'm seeing a lot of these newts saying rubbing is racing. So which I'm not sure that applies to single seaters, but I appreciate the sentiments.
I just like the name, to be honest.
That works too. Say Regara saying that he's Wario in F1, kicking people off and expecting others not to do the same to him. I
think it for me, it's two separate things. There's the on-track side of it, where at the end of the day, I do think Russell's at fault, but then there's the other side of it, of the emotions inside Formula One. Like, you kind of got to look at them separately. When you start looking at incidents and emotions and old stuff from 2019 and stuff like that, it's like, it is always going to be a mess.
And if you go down that road, you could easily make the same argument about Georgia last year. He had a couple of these where, like Sainz at Kota and Mick Schumacher in Singapore. I remember a couple of those from Georgia that weren't exactly clean either. So, we could play the moral high ground argument of going through people's histories, but in the heat of the moment, you're not remembering what happened in 2019. Or
exactly.
So it is, I think, one of those things that hey, at least it gave us something to talk about in an otherwise pretty quiet sprint race.
Definitely the best part of the sprint.
So let's go up and down the grid and let's talk about some of the winners and losers. And the first team on my list, and I think this is going to be a pretty straightforward conversation about how it went, was AlphaTauri. And Yuki gets tagged, I think, on the opening lap. I don't quite know who hit him because it wasn't on the live camera, but I know he lost a good chunk of his front wing in that incident, which I think has caused his car to lose control, and then he's hit the wall, and then a whole wheel has come off and is now laying dead center in the middle of the track, which, and by the way, I don't know what the stewards were thinking waiting so long to call the VSC and then inevitably a full-blown safety car. I don't know what the stewards were thinking on that. I don't know what they were waiting for, or what they were thinking was going to happen. It's a tire on track. Hello.
Yeah, I've been pretty I'm pretty neutral when it comes to the FIA. I feel like they are, they've got a job to do. And it is safety at the end of the day. But the thing I've been really upset with the FIA is just how slow. I've seen a lot of people complaining they're too quick with making the decisions. I think they're too slow with making the decisions, because if there's a Tech Pro barrier damaged, or there's a tire on track, or there's debris on track, I feel like you can instantly look at it and be like, that's a safety car, that's a red flag. And just wasting so many laps deciding, okay, this is now a safety car. It's just bring out the safety car straight away, bring out the red flag straight away, and stop those wasted laps, especially in a sprint. Like, we pretty much wasted 3 laps of a 17-lap sprint because they couldn't decide if a tire was able to be picked up or not.
Which it clearly was. Like, you've got to pull a safety car for that straight away, as far as I'm concerned. Also, I did some digging on Twitter real quick. Sam Collins from F1 TV posted the picture of it. It was his teammate, Nick de Vries, hit him. And
really?
Oh, I think that confirms what we already knew. This is a huge, enormous L for AlphaTauri, because we had teammate violence, and Yuki, who's been very fast this weekend. I mean, he's starting 8th tomorrow. Probably would have at least made Q2 in the shootout if it wasn't for that last second red flag. He was 100 meters away from going over the line on a lap that would have put him into Q2. But then the red flag came out, so his lap was immediately cancelled, and Yuki, knowing what Yuki's like, just swore like a sailor afterwards, and understandably so, given how unlucky he was. But yeah, late call on that horrible safety car, and then teammate on teammate violence. And it's not like Nick de Vries has got a glistening reputation at the moment, and now he's just hit his faster teammate on lap 1 of a sprint, and it's ruined both their races because Sonoda, and he's under investigation by the stewards right now as well for an unsafe release because they re-released his car in a dangerous condition because he was crabbing afterwards. So. Oh, it's that 8th place grid start for Sonoda is now probably going to be under threat. So,
I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's if you're a team, I don't have a problem with teams sometimes, risking it and sending a car up. But ultimately, if you do end up coming back out on track and causing more problems, like you should be.
You better be sure. You better be sure. Yeah.
The thing was, though, luckily, I don't think it affected the safety car. I think that the reason the safety car came out was for the debris on track. I don't think it was for Yuki because, Yuki only just came out of the pit lane. But I'm curious to see if it was Nick's fault because, there's one thing racing your teammate, but there's also one thing, obviously, having the collision with them.
Yeah, from the picture I've seen, it looks like Nick's pushed Sonoda on the outside towards the wall. So it's looking like Nick's to blame. But I'll have to wait and see it on F1 TV in full because obviously we're still pretty fresh off the sprint. But it's not looking good for Nick at all. So yeah, 14th and a DNF in the sprint. I think that's safe to say that's a loser bracket there for AlphaTauri on that one. Alfa Romeo are up next, and I like to say that they are there. They are here. They have confirmed their attendance. We're very happy to see them there. But Zhou 12th, Bottas 16th. I saw that they gambled on the soft tire with Valtteri and didn't work.
No. I was surprised how bad the soft tire was. I mean, again, coming back to the whole sprint conversation, like it kind of helps teams realize the race pace and the race strategy. So we're not going to see that tire tomorrow, which means we'll probably see a lot of people on the same strategy. But yeah, bring it back to Alfa Romeo, like you said, they're just there and they've been there like the whole year, really. It's just, I don't know. I personally would say they're probably the worst team on the grid right now. Like
maybe
AlphaTauri, Nick's bringing down AlphaTauri, but Williams is doing well. And yeah, I don't know what happened out from out. They're just there, like you said, and you can't just be there at the moment on the grid. You've got to, at least some races, be able to nab a few points.
I remember it was about 7 laps in, Valtteri said on the radio, these tires are going to melt, which I think it caught a lot of teams napping. Because I know Lando Norris, and we'll get to him in a minute, also gambled during the safety car by putting the soft tire on, and that just didn't work out in the end. Again, just no tire wear. So it was Ocon tried as well. To be fair to Ocon, He was taking a pit lane start, and we'll get to why very shortly. But I think it's another losing bracket, I'm afraid, for Alfa Romeo on this one. They're just there, and I agree. I think between them and AlphaTauri, they might be the worst team in Formula One right now. They are struggling. Yeah. They are the only team that's not. By the way, fun fact: they're the only team that's not had a car make Q3 so far this season. Because Tsunoda making Q3 yesterday was the 9th team to make a Q3 already this season, and now the only team that haven't is Alfa Romeo.
I mean, I'll ask you this. Would you rather be in a team that is able to get points and to Q3 occasionally, or would you rather be a team that is just missing out on Q3 and points every single week?
I think with the way the scoring is right now, and the fact I think the top 5 are pretty distinct, I would take the occasional hitter right now, because if you get like a P4 or a P5 finish on a messy day, or you get that lucky result, that's a huge amount of points, and I think they're going to be at a premium for the lower half of the grid this year. I think every point is going to matter big, and we'll get to the next team as to why that was, because next up is Williams. We only had one car in the sprint, unfortunately. Logan Sargent crashed during the shootout, and the damage was so great he couldn't take the start for the sprint in the end. Alex Albon just outside. He was racing with Lance Stroll for most of the sprint. He was ninth. Remember, only the top 8 in the sprint score points. So I don't know if you heard it on them, but after the race, Albon said on team radio, this format is terrible. The top 8 is only for the top 4 teams. Scrap it, which I thought was quite funny, given he's the man on the outside looking in. But bit of a mixed bag for Williams. Ponden's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, Albon's completely right with that format thing as well. Like, it's hard to watch almost after the first 5 laps. If you're a back marker team, you're thinking, well, that's it, my race is done. Like, you know, in a Grand Prix, you can hope for a strategy and safety cars, but in a sprint, it's kind of over. And I think Albon, you know, he just slowly started to realize, like, well, that's my point's gone. I'm just fighting for 1 point at this point.
Yeah, I saw the message, called it boring, said that it's boring, it's only for the top 4 teams, which I don't know how much of that is a little bit of salt, given he's in the 5th ranked team at the moment and just missed out with the Noah's Ark style of the big 4 teams taking the top 8 sprint spots. Maybe that's part of the reason why. I kind of have to say it's an L for Williams here because, I mean, you only had 1 car take the start, which isn't ideal already, and then Albon's just missed out on points. It's a shame because the man's driving well, clearly. It's just the format let him down this one. But look, if he's running 9th in the race tomorrow, that could be points, which could be big for Williams. So maybe tomorrow we'll look at them a bit more favourably as well. But I think an L on this one is probably fair to say. Yeah, on this one. McLaren are up next. Now, McLaren's in an interesting place here. Piastri was 10th. Norris was down in... Let me just double-check my scoreboard here. Piastri was 10th.
Way down.
Norris was 17th because he had to stop, didn't he? So, yeah, like... Even when McLaren brings the upgrades, and there was a lot of talk about them bringing these big upgrades to Baku, and they were running reasonably well. You know, in the if this was a Grand Prix, they'd be in the points because Piastri was 10th and Norris I think was 9th before the pit stop came through. Is it a good thing, Ponden, that like the upgrades have pretty much brought them back to where they were at the end of last season?
Well, I think sprint-wise, it's an L. But I think so far, weekend-wise, it's a W. I mean, I think they've been looking best of the rest right now. And even with Aston Martin's issues, they're doing well. I'm really curious to see how they do tomorrow with both of them sitting on the edge of points. Actually, Lando's in Lando qualified best of the rest yesterday. So, I think sprint-wise, it's a bit of an L. Like, I think an important thing to talk about is in the sprint shootout, they knew Lando wasn't going to be able to compete in the Q3 because of his tires. Yeah. And he didn't tow Piastri, and Piastri ultimately missed out on potentially a few extra spots because of missing out in Q3. So, I don't know, a bit of an L, for the sprint for them.
Yeah, I think for the sprint stuff, it's an L, I would say. But there is some reassuring signs there. And for those who don't know, they only had 12 sets of tyres for the whole weekend, and they were specifically given the allocation of 2 hard, 4 medium, and 6 soft. And if you didn't have a new set of soft left for sprint Q3, you weren't allowed to run in the session. There's rumors they might be cleaning that language up for the next sprint weekend because
hopefully.
But I would like, it reminds me a bit of the V8 days when it was like sometimes you wouldn't get 10 cars running in Q3 because they were like, we'll just save the tires for the race, it's fine. But from a fan standpoint, you want action, so it's a bit annoying that we didn't get all 10 cars out there in SQ3. I guess is what we're calling it, but I'll have to wait and see. Mike in the comments saying, I imagine teams will get more sets for the next sprint weekend. I don't think they will. I think Pirelli was told we want to ship less tyres out. So
right, because the reason why the sprint, this new format of sprint wasn't actually going to go ahead this weekend because the break, apparently Pirelli were taking a break. And they weren't going to be able to produce enough tires, but thankfully last minute they changed that. So
yeah. So I think this is a feature, Mike, in the comments more than anything else. I think it's more they want to add some jeopardy and some management into the race weekend and have a little bit of jeopardy thrown in there, saying, hey. And to be fair, the problem with that is that if you're going to be tight on tires, you're going to prioritize Friday's qualifying in the Grand Prix, not the sprint, which Is that the aim of what F1's aiming for? Probably not, is what I would say. So maybe they'll tweak it. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, it wouldn't be... a feature, not a bug. Exactly, Mike. Exactly. So we'll have to wait and see. So maybe. It wouldn't be the first time we've massively changed formats in the middle of a season. No. Haas are up next. Our friends over at MoneyGram, the Haas F1 team. And, it wasn't bad. I mean, they made some progress. Magnussen 11th from 12th on the grid. Hulkenberg, I think his tires faded a little bit towards the end. He was 15th. Probably a small L here, I would say as well, Ponden.
I don't know what's happening with Haas's drivers. I feel like one race Hulkenberg's doing well, one race Magnussen's doing well. Like that race, Hulkenberg was on the same tire everyone else, and he was just dropping and dropping. Meanwhile, Magnussen was running P11, P12, and it's like I don't know. I don't know what's happening on that side of things. But yeah, I feel like if that was a race, it would maybe be a W, considering how bad Haas looked coming into the weekend.
Yeah,
but again, the sprint format. Yeah, it's sprint format. You only get top 8, so it's kind of an L. So yeah, performance-wise, maybe a W.
Yeah. I'd say a small L on this one. I mean, I don't know how many people are expecting Haas to end up in the top 4. I'd say right now that's still a little bit lofty of a goal. So that's probably not ideal for them. So I'd say maybe a small L for Haas on this one, but nothing massively bad to write home about besides Friday. The damage for them was done on Friday, in my opinion, with Magnussen on the back foot with his technical problems, and then Hulkenberg getting knocked out in Q1 wasn't ideal either. So I think the damage for them was done yesterday as opposed to today. But that's how I look at Haas. Next up on my list, we have Mercedes. And ironically, I picked out a George Russell picture for the front of the stream because, hey, maybe I saw something coming. But yeah, Mercedes. Well, Russell held on to 4th and was pretty good. I think Hamilton got caught on that safety car restart a little bit because I think Sainz and Alonso came through and he ended up dropping to 7th in the end. So it feels like a bit of an L for Mercedes, actually, given where they started and where they ended up. I mean, Russell coming 4th was all right, but then he caused a collision. Hamilton got mugged a little bit on the sprint restart. Is this a small L, Ponden? I don't know how I feel about this one. This one's close.
I think Russell was the W. I mean, I think Russell did well to only be, obviously 3 seconds behind Max, who had the damage, but, he did well in comparison to Carlos. But coming back down to Lewis, he was 5 seconds off of Alonso in the end, and apparently Alonso was still dealing with the DRS issue. That's pretty rough when you think about it. I think from last week they've gone backwards.
Yeah, I'd say a small L again here. Mark in the chat says Merck's kind of both, maybe a neutral score. So I say, to be honest, by Mercedes standards, L. Harris has given us about 15 L's in there, so he's very adamant about this one. I think that's quite funny. Overall, I would say. I'll call that one a wash, to be honest with you, because I think George has done quite well there to end up in 4th, despite that Hamilton got caught a little bit on that one. Aston Martin are up next on my list, and forgive me, by the way, chat. I am not going to give you any Taylor Swift references this time around. I promise. I'm not crofty, so forgive me for yesterday. But Alonso 6th, Stroll 8th, both in the points. Seems about right for Aston Martin.
Yeah, I mean, again, kind of gone backwards from the last few races. But it's still a decent result considering the DRS issues. I guess that's the way you look at it. Half glass full. Okay, we had our issues and we still got some decent points, but why are those issues occurring? You're now in a championship fight with Ferrari and Mercedes. You can't have this stuff happening.
I said this to Luke Sam, who was in the chat earlier. Hi, Luke, if you're watching along with us, buddy. And he said yesterday that you talked about this a little bit, where he said, if you'd have said back in February that 6th to 8th would be disappointing for Aston Martin. They'd have bitten your arm off for that. Now that we know Aston Martin can run as the second best team in the field, 6th and 8th might actually be a little bit disappointing. And as Mike makes the point in the chat as well, the DRS issues probably held them back as well, because they've had faltering DRS wings all weekend as well. So I'd actually say this might be a small L for Aston Martin, which is weird given what they were last year.
And I've just realized so far, I think we've given every team an L, which, I mean, tying that back into the sprint, like it goes to show, like there's not much points up for grabs. And like Albon said, it's really only the top teams getting rewarded.
Yeah, it's ruthless. I think this one might be a W. Ferrari, I mean, again, relatively speaking, given, you know, the morale in the camp was quite low, a lot of rumors about Fred Vassar falling out with the old regime, and you know, Leclerc has come to Baku in fine form, again, got the, you know, got the lead, lost it late on. I think his tyres really did fall off towards the end of the sprint now. And, you know, Max just didn't have enough, I think, with the floor damage to overtake him. But Sainz made some progress to get up to 5th, Leclerc 2nd. I mean, even, I'd say, like, I think I agree with Mike, I was about to make this point as well. Leclerc finishing 2nd on its own is a W, surely, right?
Yeah, I mean, I came into the weekend not expecting Ferrari to be getting pole. So that's a W in itself to see them back to where they were last year, where they're getting pole positions, because that's what we want. We want teams fighting with Red Bull. And then coming into the race, there was hope 17 laps he can hold them off. But no, the race pace is still shocking. So, yeah, it's a W to think, you know, if you look back to last year, they were always going to lose out to both Red Bulls. So to hold Perez off, to hold Verstappen off, that's a W. And I mean, Sainz did all right, but he needs to pick it up.
Yeah, Leclerc smacked him around all weekend long. I mean, in the sprint shootout again, I think it was half a second between Leclerc and Sainz. I mean, that's not good.
Sainz had the toe.
And at the toe, so they're trying to help him, but it's not working with the Sainz at the moment. But Leclerc is having a great weekend. Even the shootout, even when he wrecked it on the final lap, he still had enough to get pole anyway. So, I'd say that's a W for Ferrari quite comfortably, given where we thought they were at the moment. And I think it's safe to say Red Bull are also getting a W here. We kind of have to a little bit. We've given me other Red Bull content creator in the house. I totally unbiased opinions, but I mean, Perez won. You know, I have to eat a little bit of humble pie here, because I remember saying yesterday I think people are making too much of Perez being the street king, and what does he do? He wins the street sprint race. Of course he does.
I mean, I do agree with you though. Like, I do think, like, yes, he is done well at at street circuits, but I don't think that's necessarily like, I don't know. I don't feel like that's an attribute of Perez's. I think it's more just a coincidence, really. Like, he does do well at street circuits, but if you do look at a lot of the results, like, there's reasons behind it. I mean, he did well today, but we'll see how he compares to Max tomorrow when Max doesn't have a damaged car.
Yeah, and that's going to be, and Verstappen's going to be ahead on the grid for the Grand Prix tomorrow. So if they will be able to fix that hole, because even in Parc Ferme, if you replace it like for like, it's fine, as long as it's not a different spec of the same part. So that damage probably won't be there tomorrow. So you'd think that Max would probably bounce back a little bit stronger tomorrow in terms of race pace. 1 and a 3 compared to a 1 and a 2 on paper isn't all that bad, given that Max had some damage. So that's about as good as you were going to get. So I think that's an easy W for Red Bull, really, on that one. Before we get out of here, pondering a couple of things real quick. Are you going Max for the win tomorrow? I mean, I feel like coming into the race, if we hadn't have seen the sprint, I would have been more hopeful for Leclerc P2, Max P1, Perez P3, but I think we've seen it now. I think it's Max P1, Perez P2 tomorrow, and P3 will be interesting, because I mean, Ferrari looked good, but at the same time, like, we don't know what their long run pace is like on the tire deck. Yeah, that's good. I think that it could be very interesting between Ferrari and Merckx, maybe for a spot on the podium in terms of, maybe tire wear comes into it. Maybe that can bring Merckx into play
Potentially,
for a
yeah.
podium finish. If Russell can stay with that leading group for a little, as long as he did during the sprint, maybe that's a good sign that Merckx has got a bit more pace than maybe anticipated going in. Because they've been a bit all over the place, Merckx. They've been qualifying. I mean, Russell got knocked out in Q2. Hamilton just barely made it in. And then they found something in Q3, so I'm not sure I'm not fully convinced on Mercedes yet, but we'll have to wait and see. But that'll just about do it for our winners and losers for the sprint. Ponden, tell the good people where they can find you real quick if they haven't already.
You can find me over on Twitch, twitchtv.ponden, and over on my YouTube channel as well. The same thing, at Ponden on YouTube. Covering every session.
I assume you're gonna. Yeah, I was gonna say, you assume you're gonna be doing the watch along tomorrow on there.
Yeah, definitely will be live, and even for F2. Oh, I've been enjoying F2 so much.
Yeah. So
recording in progress.
So, I've got to press the recording button on my Zoom there for a second. There, whoops. But yeah, so you definitely think Red Bull 1-2 for the win, and then maybe Leclerc third.
Yeah, I think Red Bull 1-2, Leclerc P3, and we'll see if the Mercs can kind of get on the back of Ferrari with the long race tire deck.
Maybe a surprise from Alonso, maybe a little bit.
Or, I mean, that DRS issue, I think, has been plaguing them. So, it'll be good to see what it's like if they don't have an issue.
Yeah, that's fair enough on this one. But like I said, give Ponden a follow if you haven't already. Do check him out if you haven't already. Give him a nice little WTF1 bump from us. We'll be back tomorrow for the race review. That'll be 4 p.m. tomorrow UK time. Gonna have another cool special guest review. But I'll give you a hint. If you know your sports cars, you'll recognize him. So a little bit more on that tomorrow, 4 p.m. to do check that out a little bit after the race. Get some lunch in after you're done, and then we'll review all the action from Azerbaijan on that one. But that'll do it from me and from Ponden. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll catch you guys soon. Sayonara.